The house was near enough on this corner here, you know, number 10, which was in the left-hand corner coming down from the road there with a brick wall going across the road like, you know, cul-de-sac.
Sometime after the murders were discovered, the name Rillington Place was abolished. A petition was received from the then residents of Rillington Place, who didn't like, quite understandably, the associations of living in that particular road. Some didn't see any harm in it staying as it was. A gentleman who ran a window cleaning service said, "I noticed that the name of Rillington Place is to be changed to Ruston Close. The original name has never done my business any harm to date, but the printing costs involved by the changing of the name is going to cost something like £11.13 shillings. Am I therefore entitled to anything towards this cost from the council?" And then later on, there was a large redevelopment which took down all of these houses. There is no building actually standing on the site of the old 10 Rillington Place. It may well have been that someone thought that it might be better not to build on a site where there had been so many murders. From time to time we will get people telephoning in to find out where is Rillington Place, because they want to go up and look at the actual street, if not the house. Some of them are quite disappointed to be told that no, they can't see either because they haven't existed for a good few years.
You still get letters come up for him. John, Reginald, Halliday, Christie, you know, 10 Rillington Place. Still on their mailing list.
Crawley, a disused builder's yard is under police guard as local police and Home Office officials search through debris. Gruesome discoveries are brought to light. Detectives uncover what are thought to be human remains.
Mr. Haig had these premises about 40-odd years ago, I suppose. Now, I don't know the exact date. And here, he made it so infamous by shooting ladies and cutting up the bodies. A nasty habit the man had. When we took over, on the left-hand side here, there were a couple of those acid vats. Those large glass containers that contained acid. There was an enormous galvanized vat that he put the parts of these unfortunate people in. The acid itself he had to get rid of. There were no drains around. In those days, this was a magnificent hedge right the way through, and it belonged to the gentleman next door, gentleman who had one arm. Nothing to do with Haig at all, he just had one arm. And he couldn't understand why his hedge kept dying. We understand now from the police report that the slurry was poured over the roots of his hedge, so in consequence, it certainly would die, of course.
More detectives arrive on the scene, bringing cases in which to carry away their finds. Specimens, including fragments of clothing, are later taken to Scotland Yard laboratories for tests.
There was a program on television with Simpson, the pathologist, and he said that when he came down, he immediately looked upon the ground and saw 3 or 4 gallstones. Now, that must be an absolute trained eye, I think, to see gallstones just lying around. But I haven't seen any since. And when I first found out about what the place was used for, I did not want to use the offices. And locked the old darling up, the building, I mean, of course, and put beside it a shed. And in the shed I had my oils and my battery and everything else, and I virtually conducted my business from the shed. And I thought, what the heck, one particular day I was round here, this is ridiculous. So I said goodbye to the shed and said hello to the offices. Above, there were the produce of what he did. He manufactured. He did plastic fingernails and fertilizer bombs, and they were still in the attic above. Really, what comes to my mind is compatibility. After a while, it didn't come initially, no way, but matter of fact, he frightened me in the beginning, but still, apart from that, now we live together. I can't blame this building for someone's diabolical habits. It was built as offices, it is offices today, and I'm happy with it. Naturally, some of the neighbours here, when we first took over, knew John Haig. And one chap in particular, one afternoon I'm working here, and he came over, and he said, you know, Dennis, he said, I should have known that John Haig was a murderer. Wow, how could you know this? Well, he said, I watched him, he said, because one day, when his car pulled out from the yard, I saw it go up and down over the bumps in the road. I should have known he had a body in there. I should have known. Stories like that, they come and relate to us, you know. They live the past, don't they, over and over again, of course. We still actually get postcards saying it's Haig's birthday. I don't know why, but those things do happen, still happen today.
I didn't know anything about the history of the house when I came here in 81. Until later on, I was talking to a friend and she said to me, you live in a house where a murder took place. It was a man named George Smith who used to marry rich ladies and then kill them in the bath. So he claimed that, you know, she must have had her feet in the bathroom and that's how she drowned.
When I heard, I didn't really like the sound of it. And I thought that he was quite mean, like going around marrying women and then killing them.
He happened to have used the name Williams and Rose as aliases in the past when he got married to other women. It's quite a coincidence because my name is Rose Williams and the owner of the house happens to be James Smith. The bath was moved to Madame Tussauds. And funny enough, I did see it when I went to visit Madame Tussauds. But of course, it never occurred to me that I will be moving or living in a house where that bath had been. You have your imagination increases when you're on your own. You start thinking of all sorts of things. I mean, there are times when I hear footsteps and I think, my God, there's somebody in the house. And I get myself into a state.
one of my friends actually said that her house was built over a graveyard. So when I heard that, it made me feel more comfortable about it.
Sometimes I think if her spirit does exist here, she is more like a guardian angel. She does look after us. And to have been killed that way, it's never going to happen to anybody else.
We were just going round the bay. Suddenly the big dark cloud came over and down came real thunderstorm, heavy rain, and we were really getting battered. And I said to David, head for the Ross, which we did, and eventually managed to get the boat moored at the Ross. And then I thought, I better go up and tell the lighthouse keeper who we are, because they'll be wondering. I knocked on the door, no answer, but I carried on and went into the bedroom. And when I opened the bedroom door, of course, I got a tremendous shock because there was a gigantic pool of blood on the floor. The figure in the bed was covered up. He had a towel, very blood-stained towel over the head. And I lifted this towel and I saw that his head was very bashed in. Oh, it was a big shock to Kakubri. It seemed such a stupid murder. For so little money, there was hardly any money involved at all. And a murder like that on an island in a lighthouse discovered by a chance sailor, it was all a great story. It even reached America. Phantom killer of the lighthouse. The trim little yacht was like a cork on the turbulent waters. Grim-faced and anxious, Thomas Robertson Collin gripped the helm and steered towards the open ocean ahead.
Well, my name is Douglas Molyneux, and I live on Little Ross Island, Kakubri. It's about 30 acres large, and I'm the only person living here. I have a kind of drawbridge mentality, and I rather like the idea of being separated from land. I have been here 9 years now, and I like the challenge of living somewhere rather difficult, and there's no doubt that living here is quite difficult. It is sometimes desolately quiet. You can hear nothing but wind for days on end. And the sound of wind actually gets quite wearing after a while. I have had moments of despair, but never such that I just wanted to give the whole thing up. When I first came here, I had no knowledge of the murky past of the lighthouse cottages. It was subsequent to moving in, really, that I learned that a murder had taken place here. It may have been instrumental in me being able to come here, insofar as perhaps having a murder being committed here deterred others from coming here, and that was why the place was still empty. It certainly hasn't put me off, but I am aware that it has taken place, and so perhaps I treat the house with a little more reverence than you would treat just any building, because someone lost their life here in tragic circumstances. When I first came here, I did think perhaps that a bit like arsonists, do murderers ever revisit the scene of their crime? And if this chap ever comes out of jail, would he want to come back to Little Ross and see if there's anybody else he could bump off? I soon put that aside when I learned that he'd committed suicide. That was quite a relief, I suppose. The very first room I stayed in was the room in which the murder was committed. But I did find that that room was extremely cold, impossible to heat, even with a fire on. And it was partly for that reason that we decided that we would demolish that room effectively. And since doing that, we've lost the coldness. There is a feeling that I'm not alone here. I get that sometimes. Usually when the weather's poor, I'm aware of a presence in the form of the shadow of a human being. That's all I can describe it as. Hovering around in the house or passing a window outside. And it's more than just the shadow of a seagull against the sun or something like that. It's the sort of thing that makes you look up from whatever you're doing and be prepared to greet someone, but then find there's nobody there.
There's nothing about the flat that really reminds me of the fact that somebody was murdered here. It's not spooky at all. I mean, if it were a huge house with long, dark and creaky corridors, I suppose you would be looking for the spookiness in the house. My mother stayed here. She was quite intrigued, you know. I told her that, you know, there was this playwright. He'd been murdered here by his lover, and his head was beaten and was crashed open by a hammer.
This is the main room of the flat. It is a studio, so this is obviously the bedroom as well.
And the living room.
Yeah.
And the reception.
Exactly.
The bathroom is essentially the same as in Orton's day. The bath and the loo were here. It's space to escape from each other.
I can imagine at the time it must have been very claustrophobic, because apparently Joe Orton was inside writing, and he was here with his partner all the time.
Can we go past the theatre?
Oh no, I knew you'd say that. I knew. This is supposed to be my night.
Actually, I just want to get out of this fucking room.
I better have my Valium now.
It doesn't look anything like what it used to look like back then. The ceiling had, what was it, pink and yellow?
Pink and yellow tiles, yes.
Black and white tiles on the floor.
The walls were entirely taken up by the murals that Halliwell was doing.
That he was sent to prison for because he's defaced library books and cut them out.
It's just, where are we? Just down here is number 25. Here we are, right outside. If we come across this side,
the Orton Walk, which happens every
other Saturday
or something, is the main intrusion.
it's up there, really more of a bed sitter than a flat. It really is just one large room with a kitchen behind and a small bathroom.
It's a reasonable hour on a Saturday morning when most people would be getting up and be looking out the window, and there is a crowd of people staring up at you.
You knocked on the door, and sort of a little old lady who lived in the ground floor opened the window and said, "Yes?" And you say, "I want to see the gentleman upstairs." "Who?" "Mr. Halliwell, Mr. Orton." "Oh, them boys," she'd say. And she'd let you in, and you'd go upstairs to a sort of a smell of cabbage and corned beef and that sort of thing.
We had the Orton Society back in May. We had about 10 people in here, tramping around and
taking photographs of themselves near the window.
You get the occasional letter from drama students who are putting on a production of Loot or something, and
who say that
want to get the aura of the character by coming to the flat. The history of the flat can only add value. We've had interest from people who saying, if you ever sell, I would be very interested in buying because
it is Joe Orton's
because it's Joe
former
Orton's flat.
Yeah.
This is number 21 Cranley Gardens, where we are now, and over the fence is number 23, where Dennis Nelson did all his activities. I've lived here since 1950, so of course I was around during that time.
Now, first heard what was going on was when a policeman came to the front door and said to me something rather unpleasant has happened next door. So I said, oh, which way? Because I was standing in the hall there, and I said, which way? Because the man next door just punched his wife. So I thought, he's done her in, you see. But it was the other way. I just thought it was unpleasant, especially in view of all the blue bottles. Revolting they were. And I also noticed that the man next door pulled a lot of rubbish bags out. Of course, I was inundated with press from all over the place. Even the Daily Telegraph rang up. They didn't come round, but they did ring up. I'm afraid I've got a rather dirty mind, because a lot of these young men come into the house, and I thought it was the girl there that they were after. Never dreaming it was right upstairs. I thought, oh, little so-and-so. She's got all these young men coming round, you see.
I don't think anyone was in any danger here anyway, because it seems most of the victims he picked up were people that couldn't be accounted for. And I don't think he would have been daft enough to have taken out any of the neighbours.
Quite a presentable young man with going to work with his business suit, collar and tie, and off he went up the hill. Pair of glasses on, he looked quite normal. I sort of nodded to him and said hello. Yeah, that was Dennis.
We had, in fact, more trouble with ghouls for a while after the events finished than we ever did with the press or the police.
Oh, they were dreadful.
But the ghoulish people, I think, were just the pits, really, to use an expression of John McEnroe.
Years afterwards, they brought coachloads of people, and they all stopped and they were all gulping up, all had a look, and they all drove on, and that's gone on for a long time. And every time I give my address, Cranley Gardens, I say, yes, next door.
There's two lots of builders have been at it, and the police took away all the bits and pieces from the kitchen and other parts of the flat and resurrected it all in the Black Museum, apparently. So there's not really much of a trace of Nelson and the house as it was.
Beautiful flats next door. They seem to be quite happy coming out in the garden with their barbecues and things. And I suppose it depends on the person, but there was an article in the local paper and some woman had said, oh, she couldn't stand it in there, she couldn't spend the night in there or something, and she was all going hysterical over it. I mean, it's 12, 15 years ago, isn't it? I don't know why. Perhaps she was one of these that feels the atmosphere. It doesn't worry me.
I don't think Cranley Gardens will ever live it down. After all, Rillington Place is still remembered years and years after. So I think Cranley Gardens and Cromwell Street will be remembered probably forever now.
There has been speculation about whether the name of the street should be changed. If the people who live in Cromwell Street want the name changed, then we will very likely do something about it. We believe that the only thing that should happen to 25 Cromwell Street is that it should be completely demolished.